In the beginning of March, I started reading this book called Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, and there is a long answer to why I started it and a short one. The long answer is I've been seeing it everywhere. I just wanted to see what it is that made people so obsessed about this story, so enamored by it. So I just wanted to analyze that, I wanted to look into it in a deeper, more enlightened way. Short answer, it was available in my library. I just really like how free my mind becomes when I'm thinking about getting books from the library, because I get their books usually that I would never have picked up unless I had a library card, because I don't want to buy these books. But in a library, it's like, whatever, if I don't like the book, I'm just gonna return it. If I like it, I'm gonna buy it, or just, make a video about it and buy it, because obviously I bought them. So yeah, I not only read Once Upon a Broken Heart, but I read also the second and the third book in this trilogy. So we're gonna talk about them. About a year ago, I made a video in this similar way talking about Mead Mishap series by Kimberly Lemming. So we're gonna basically make this video. So we're gonna make this video in the exact same way as that one. There's gonna be summaries for each of the books, and then we're gonna analyze them and just discuss things that, well, I'm gonna discuss them. You can discuss them in the comments, but you're gonna listen to me now. But before we can delve deeper into each of these individual books, let's see what Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy is. So Once Upon a Broken Heart is a YA fantasy story by Stephanie Garber. The first book was published in 2021, and then the following two books were published each in 2022 and 2023. The second book is called A Ballad of Never After, and the third one, A Curse for True Love. I have my notes behind my phone. It's really hard to see. This was a sequel trilogy in the already established Caraval universe by the same author. And even though you don't have to read the Caraval trilogy in order to read these books, there are some recurring characters that were part of the Caraval trilogy. The first book in this trilogy already has over 500,000 ratings on Goodreads, and each one of these books has a very consistent over 4-star rating. So that's pretty good. So let me read out to you a Goodreads synopsis. This is the synopsis of the first book, obviously, but it's kind of also the introduction to the whole series. So this is what Goodreads says about this book. For as long as she can remember, Evangeline Fox has believed in true love and happy endings, until she learns that the love of her life will marry another. Desperate to stop the wedding and to heal her wounded heart, Evangeline strikes a deal with the charismatic but wicked Prince of Hearts. In exchange for his help, he asks for 3 kisses, to be given at the time and place of his choosing. But after Evangeline's first promised kiss, she learns that bargaining with an immortal is a dangerous game, and that the Prince of Hearts wants far more from her than she'd pledged. He has plans for Evangeline, plans that will either end in the greatest happily ever after or the most exquisite tragedy. So as I said, this is part of the Caraval universe, and you don't need to read the Caraval trilogy, but if you wish to know more about one of the main characters in this book, aka Jax, Prince of Hearts, he is a character in Caraval. So because of that, let's go into Caraval and see what it is about. I recently got a whiteboard, so I'm gonna now use it for every video that I make. Alright, let's talk Caraval. Caraval? Caraval? I don't know. Caraval is a YA fantasy trilogy that was first published in 2018, and as I said, it's a trilogy, meaning it consists of 3 books called Caraval, Legendary, and Finale. I still don't know whether it is completely goofy or absolutely genius to call your final book in the trilogy Finale. You be the judge of that. And the synopsis is as follows. Scarlet Dragna has never left the tiny island where she and her sister, Tella, live with their powerful and cruel father. Now Scarlet's father has arranged a marriage for her, and Scarlet thinks her dreams of seeing Caraval, the faraway once-a-year performance where the audience participates in the show, are over. But this year, Scarlet's long-dreamt-of invitation finally arrives. With the help of a mysterious sailor, Tella whisks Scarlet away to the show. Only, as soon as they arrive, Tella is kidnapped by Caraval's mastermind organizer, Legend. It turns out that this season's Caraval revolves around Tella, and whoever finds her first is the winner. Scarlet has been told that everything that happens during Caraval is only an elaborate performance. Nevertheless, she becomes enmeshed in a game of love, heartbreak, and magic. And whether Caraval is real or not, Scarlet must find Tella before the 5 nights of the game are over, or a dangerous domino effect of consequences will be set off, and her beloved sister will disappear forever. Couple of things that I wish to just mention about this whole trilogy. So as you can see, the main characters are Scarlet and Tella, or her full name is Donatella. And these two characters are characters that appear in Once Upon a Broken Heart because from what I was able to understand, they're the queens or princesses of the South Kingdom from which our main character comes from. Another thing that is important to mention about this trilogy is that obviously because it is the original mother trilogy, let's say, the story of Once Upon a Broken Heart is set after the happenings of the final book finale in the Caraval trilogy. And other than that, not much is really important to say about this trilogy, but what we will look into is Jax's backstory. Jax is a character that occurs in this Caraval trilogy, specifically in Legendary and Finale, the third and the second book. Why did I put them in that order? I could have just said the second and the third. Never mind. Jax is a fate, and I will go over the whole world building. There's like a couple of things that we will have to go through in order to understand this world a bit better. But so far, let me tell you what fates are. Fates are the demigods who used to rule the world, and they were banished by a witch into this so-called deck of destiny, which is just a deck of cards. And there is multiple fates. They are also categorized into higher fates and lower. Is that how it's called? No, greater and lesser fates. Sorry, it's greater and lesser fates. And a lot of the times when fates are described, any one of these fates, you can really see that they're described as these very jealous, possessive, overly protective type of characters that don't really recognize good from evil because they were demigods. So like they don't have the same moral rules as the humans do. But another thing that is constantly mentioned about the fates is that when they're feeling something, it is all consuming. It's very intense. So Jax, as I said, is a fate. He's specifically a greater fate, and he's also called Prince of Hearts. We will talk more about him later, but what is important to understand about him in order to understand what the hell happens in Caraval is that he can control people's emotions. He can also slow down people's hearts. And another thing that you know is that every fate kind of has a curse put upon them. And this one specific curse is something that they will constantly search for. So there is another character called Lala in Once Upon a Broken Heart who is also called an unwed bride. And that is because like she's constantly searching for this love, but like that's something that she can never get. And that is because she's always searching to get married, but she never actually does. So similar to that, Jax's curse is kind of that he's searching for his one true love, yet he cannot find it. And to put it on top of that, he has a curse with a deadly kiss, meaning that whoever he kisses dies, unless they're his one true love. Now that we know that, let's see who Jax is in the Caraval trilogy. So the first thing that we know about him is that he somehow manages to become an heir to the throne. Like he's not of a royal bloodline or anything, he's just an heir. I don't know, I haven't read Caraval, as you can see. He makes a deal with one of the main characters, Donatella, to give him Legend's true name and to pretend to be his fiancée. She doesn't do that, and as a punishment, he kisses her. And as I said, his kisses are deadly, and he does tell her that it will kill her, so he fully just did that consciously. She survives, which obviously puts both of them into this confused state of like, is Donatella Jax's true love? Later, he's ordered to manipulate Donatella's emotions, but he shows his other soft side and actually helps her rescue Legend. Now, later, he takes control of Donatella's emotions, which was actually consensual because if I understood correctly, like she gave him control of his emotions, like intentionally. However, what she did not consent to is marrying him, because apparently the words that she was supposed to say to give him control of her emotions also were words to bind them in marriage, and Jax just didn't tell her so. And then once she finds out that she got married to him without her knowing, she stabs him in the heart. And obviously that leaves Jax heartbroken, and that is kind of how we meet him in the beginning of Once Upon a Broken Heart. And there's this theory about Jax meeting Evangeline in the Caraval trilogy. We're gonna go over that later because there are a lot of, not plot holes I would say, just unexplained plot things that don't make sense in the grand scheme of things. I'm kind of glad that I haven't read Caraval before I was reading Once Upon a Broken Heart, because I would not be rooting for him that much as I did. So yeah. But that's it that I want to say about Caraval. That was the only thing that I wanted to talk about, basically just Jax's backstory. Again, all of these things are kind of explained in Once Upon a Broken Heart. There are like references to what happens in Caraval, but Jax explains it enough so that you don't have to read them. But then again, if you wish to, read them. And I'm probably sure that a lot of the fans of Once Upon a Broken Heart already came to that book because they read Caraval. So that's it about Caraval. Now let's go to Once Upon a Broken Heart. I don't know why I'm showing you the paper. I also have the book. But yeah, let's go with the book summary first. Oh yeah, in case you didn't know already, spoilers, 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 okay? Like there's just gonna be a ton of spoilers because I'm summarizing the whole plot of each of these 3 books. So viewers' discretion advised. Our main character, Evangeline, lives in the South and wishes to stop the wedding between her stepsister, Marisol, and the boy she loves, Luke, because she thinks he is cursed. Already off to a good start. She asks for the help of the one and only Jax, Lord Jax, Prince of Hearts, a fate. He agrees to help her in exchange for 3 kisses from her to anyone he tells her to kiss. He turns everyone to stone, and to save them, Evangeline drinks a potion that turns her to stone instead. After getting rescued, she finds out some time has passed, and she's deemed as a hero who is sent to the magnificent north to meet the crown prince, Apollo, at his ball where he will choose his bride. Unbeknownst to her, Jax is there too, and he demands her first kiss to go to Apollo, who through Jack's blood is enchanted and becomes obsessed with Evangeline. He proposes to her and soon they get married after some pressuring from Jax's side. It will all make sense later. Evangeline wishes to remove the spell from Apollo, and when Jax gives her his blood again to break the curse, Apollo dies. Then Evangeline gets cursed through the kiss too by becoming unable to stop crying, and she must run away with Jax because she's being framed for murder. They go to Lala, another fate, who cures Evangeline. She finds out Jax was not behind the murder, so together they once more go on an adventure to meet the vampires. Yes, the vampires, specifically one called Chaos, a fate, who gives them some clues. Remember Luke? Yeah, I forgot to mention he got mauled by a wolf while Evangeline was stoned, and because of his severe injuries, he went to the vampires to get turned. He tricks Evangeline to release him from his cage, and when trying to save her, Jax gets bitten by Luke, starting the vampire transformation. But don't you worry, Jax stays human. Well, as human as an immortal demigod can be. And he and Evangeline escape the vampire den. Evangeline takes the matters into her own hands and sneaks into the castle, where she finds out Marisol, her stepsister, bewitched Apollo's brother into marrying her. Turns out his brother is part of some secret society that needs to keep the Valerie Arch unopened. Oh yeah, did I mention the Valerie Arch? So it turns out that Jax was kind of behind some stuff that happened because Evangeline is the prophesized one to open the arch, and he needs that to happen, so he put a sleeping spell on Apollo, meaning he's still alive. She feels betrayed by him and swears never to trust Jax again, but we shall see how true that will be in the next book. I did not realize how difficult it will be to summarize these diabolical plots until writing this. First of all, I would like to thank the Caraval wiki for providing me with so much useful information. All of these books I mainly rated around like 3.5 stars. The highest rated was the second book. We will get to that. But there was just something that pulled me into the story, something so entertaining about it. And I was just like, oh my god, why are all these plot lines so diabolical? And why am I into that? And then I remembered, I grew up with telenovelas, okay? And then it like hit me in the head with a brick that this is Fantasy Violetta. And if you think about it, the guys of the stories, Tomas, Leon, and Diego, are basically Luke, Jax, and Apollo. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. And these books just get more into the telenovela territory as the plot progresses, because my god. First, I would like to say, when I was making those summaries, I really had to rely on people summarizing the books. Even though I read them, and like I was immediately summarizing them after I finished the book, the plot... What plot? But I think that's because like you're not reading these books for the plots. Like yeah, they're crazy, but there's something just so entertaining about these books, and I cannot explain it. Like it's the vibes, you know, like they're perfect. I read them as audiobooks, and then I bought the physical copies because I wanted to like tab the important moments that I wish to discuss. And you might see which one I like the most based on the amount of tabs. But you can also see that for the first book, I have the least amount of tabs. I don't really have a lot to say about this book, to be honest. But the first thing we will talk about is actually the characters, because we need to go through them first. Why did I say it like that? Alright, so we got our main character, Evangeline.
My bad Evangeline.
That ain't no fun.
So the first time you meet Evangeline, she's this girly that just wants to live out her happily ever after. And in the beginning especially, she says that she just wants it to be uneventful. She just wants a peaceful happily ever after, right? Well, she doesn't get that. Throughout all of the books, the main thing about her is that she does believe in true love. She believes that love can be magical and that love can cure curses. So throughout the whole, not just book, but the entire trilogy, Evangeline is portrayed as a brave character. She does a lot of courageous things, but also there is a lot of naivete in her actions. Like, for example, this time when she went to free Luke from the cage, even though she knew that he's transforming into a vampire and that he definitely wishes to bite her. But that's also kind of courageous in its own way. Like, it's so nice that she has such strong beliefs in, like, the good in people and that, like, love can cure everything. And as for Jax, he gets presented as this very cocky, full of himself dude. But another thing that I realized, especially if you continue reading this whole trilogy, is that he's low-key traumatized. Like, there's just a lot of shit that happened in his life, and although I'm pretty sure he traumatized as many people, still I can see where a lot of his actions are coming from. Does that justify them? No, but still, I can understand where it's coming from. And especially what we do know about his backstory, but also what I've previously talked to you about in Caraval, you can see that this did definitely break him. Because imagine if the person you thought that was your one true love, the only way you could break a curse, the only way you could find some semblance of like a nice, peaceful life, stabs you in the heart, chooses somebody else, and is like... But yeah, I don't know what else to really say about these characters because, like, I don't want to go into the full analysis of their character. Like, you can always read these books and just see for yourself. I just want to now talk more about, like, what were my opinions of certain aspects of the book. So let's get into that. As I said, I have the least to say about this first book because other books I think are more entertaining, at least in my personal opinion. But I believe this was a good introduction to the whole trilogy. As someone who really doesn't like drama usually, I loved this, and that's what surprised me the most about it. Was I bewitched? What is this? What is this? I also really like how I started calling this a fantasy Bridgerton. Well, I mean, Bridgerton is fantasy in a sense, but I mean, it's categorized as a historical romance, so that's why I'm calling this fantasy Bridgerton, because there is literally a rumor column that is being written constantly about the characters. Hello, Whistledown, are you there? And like, plot immediately left my mind, but the vibes did not leave me. They're still there. And I love it. And I guess the reason also why I particularly did like the drama that happens in this book is because all of this series doesn't really take itself too seriously. Like, yeah, of course, there is a lot of things that happen that are taken seriously. Like, that's the whole point of the drama. It's still, there was like a hint of comedy in everything. And I think because of that, I was able to really get into this story because a lot of the times when I'm reading fantasy stories, especially fantasy romance, it is written in a way that is like, this is the most important thing you're gonna read today. Like, this is like life and death type of a situation. And although obviously there is a lot of life and death situations here, they're written in a more lighthearted way, and I definitely appreciate that. But what I did like also about this book is some friendships that happen, specifically Lala and Evangeline. So I previously mentioned Lala. She's another fate, and she's the unwed bride. Evangeline and Lala kind of immediately hit it off, and they're friends, and I love that. Usually when two female characters are introduced to each other, there's already like some form of rivalry, right? Yeah, happening. And I just don't like that. So I like when girls are just being girls and supporting girls. Except the fact that Lala does in fact poison Evangeline later on. But I mean, we're gonna get there. I've already spoken about Jax's backstory, and it is explained, a bit of it at least, in this first book. And the thing that I would like to draw attention to is what I previously mentioned about the possibility of Jax meeting Evangeline already in the Caraval trilogy. So the theory goes as follows. Evangeline's father had a curiosity shop, and this curiosity shop was in multiple locations. And Evangeline used to travel around the curiosity shops to like help wherever help was needed. And the theory stands that Evangeline was in the curiosity shop when Jax was there, and that's what made his heart beat. Now, I just realized that I did not explain anything about Jax's heart. It was prophesied that Jax's heart would start beating when he meets his one true love. And in Caraval, his heart started beating, which further kind of proves that Donatella was Jax's one true love, but as we all come to know, she's not. So that was also something confusing to fans, like, why did Jax's heart start beating if Donatella is not his one true love? So the way the theory goes is that when Jax kissed Donatella, his heart was still not beating because it was never mentioned when like Donatella pushed him away then. But the next time they meet, when she pushes him away, his heart is beating. So the theory is that like in between those two moments, Jax meets Evangeline, or is at least in close proximity to her, because that's when his heart starts beating. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah, that was something that you will see is a pattern in all of these books where there's a lot of questions and not enough answers, Stephanie Garber. And I would like to thank AO3 Fanfics for actually making me aware of this plot hole with Jax's heart, because I would never even think about that, and I would never even know about it if I haven't read a fanfic that tried to explain this, because the fan was so pissed off at there not being enough explanations that they made a fanfic explaining it, and it was written in a very convincing way to the point where I would think like, Stephanie Garber, is that you? So thank you to that fanfic. The last thing that I would like to mention about this book is obviously Jax and Evangeline moments. Here in this first book there is like the least amount of them, but you can see how they start to like gain closeness to one another, how they're starting to care for each other. I like how they kind of formed a friendship before this. Obviously this friendship kind of goes into flames once Jax betrays her at the end, but the two of them really have a lot of chemistry together. Like when you're reading, you were constantly giggling and like kicking your feet because you're like, oh my god, yes. And like I just like that whole trope about like, you know, Jax being this bastard, cocky, self-assured idiot, but he secretly pines hard for Evangeline. And that is evident in like the moments when Evangeline cries tears until like she dies from dehydrating herself, I guess. And Jax is like holding on to her the whole night, not letting her go. I don't know, like those are such nice moments. Obviously also that cave scene. Nice. So even though there is the least amount of them in this book, I like how they were set up, because let me tell you, the next book we're gonna talk about. Ooh. In conclusion, Once Upon a Broken Heart, nice introduction to the whole story, but it's not my personal favorite. But let's get into my personal favorite. The Ballad of Never After. Let's go. Rejoice, for Apollo is not dead, just under a sleeping spell, and Evangeline is hoping to awaken him, and does so, but there is a problem. He is cursed again with the Archer's Curse, which demands of him to hunt and kill Evangeline. But to make the matters even spicier, there is one more curse put on him and Evangeline, where if one gets hurt, the other does too, meaning if Evangeline dies, so does Apollo. Obviously not a good deal for anybody, so with some persuasion from Lala, Evangeline decides to team up with Jax to find all the magical stones that would open the Valerie Arch, which might have the cure for the curse. Now I would like to read out a sentence I found on one site that summarizes the book, which says, I quote, "There are some hot and steamy feelings for Jax going on, although Evangeline refuses to admit to them. Instead, she heads to the library, as you do. Evangeline starts discovering some secrets about Jax and finds the first missing stone. Yet again, I must quote the website. Another girl actually found it first, and Chaos said she died, but then the girl appears and tries to kill Evangeline. There can be only one, I guess. Evangeline kills the other girl, though." Fuck. One side plot important to mention at this point is Lala's wedding, in which Evangeline not only finds two stones, but discovers that it was actually Lala who put the curse on Apollo. Evangeline gets injured because of the mirror curse, so Jax takes her to the Hollow, where he grew up, and helps her get better, and she figures out he is the Archer from the stories. I would explain the story, but there is already so much happening, so let's just skip that for now. Jax comes back wounded, and he and Evangeline share a sweet moment where Evangeline is confused with her feelings towards Jax, and realizes the last stone is actually in the house they're in. After leaving the Hollow, Jax reveals he wishes to just collect all the stones and not open the arch, because with the stones, he can turn back time to a specific point, and he wishes to turn it to a point before he kissed Donatella from Caraval. We don't have time for all the explanation, because he believes she's his true love. Evangeline is devastated by these news, especially after figuring out her feelings towards Jax, and she and Chaos go to open the arch. Inside of it, we find out is the Valor family, and Chaos is their son. His curse is removed, and he unconsciously starts sucking Evangeline's blood, because he is a vampire, taking too much and killing her. Jax comes too late, but manages to save her by turning back the time to before Evangeline and Chaos open the Valerie Arch. He instructs Evangeline to leave, and as she goes, she comes to terms with the fact that she loves Jax and needs to tell him so, but is interrupted by Apollo, who is actually still her husband, remember him, who erases her memories and pretends nothing ever happened, and the two are just lovey-dovey spouses. See, I told you this was just like the telenovelas. It even has the memory wiping plot. Fates are not held up to human standards of morality, and that kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that like 80% of all the drama that happens in these books is because of the fates. For example, Jax, oh god, Jax. In one of the balls, when they're searching for the Valerie Arch stones, he goes and almost kisses one of the darling sisters knowingly. Like, he knows that he's gonna kill this person if he kisses her. And then when Evangeline stops him and asks him, why are you doing this? He's like, I'm bored. Why is he just going off kissing or killing people basically with his kisses? Is he trying to get some data from her? Like, is she important in finding the stones? I don't know. It was not really explained. So then I'm just like, the fuck, Jax? Like, why are you doing this? And it's not just this particular fate that is doing all the drama. Lala, as I said, also does a lot. So as I've said in the summary of this book, Apollo has countless curses put upon him. I mean, like, he does some crazy shit, but my god, this man has gone through curses, okay? Like, all of them. And it is revealed in this book that it was Lala who put both the Archer's curse on him and the one who put the Mirror curse. And I do have to say, like, again, while I'm reading these books, brain completely turned off. So when it was told that it was Lala who actually put that curse on Evangeline, for some reason that hurt me more than all the other curses Jax has put. And I think that's because, like, from the start, like, that's not defending his behavior, obviously, but, like, Jax was always saying, I'm a fate, don't trust me, I'm gonna curse you. That's it. But with Lala, Evangeline immediately became besties, right? Like, they were besties. And then, like, for her bestie to curse her, that was sad. So I already mentioned this about how Jax kind of is traumatized. Let's get into that. So in this book, we learn more about him and his past, not just the past of the Caraval trilogy, but also like how he became a fate and like who was he prior to being a fate and of how this curse came to be. So in this book, we learn that his first love died after he kissed her. And that was after he managed to break free from the Archer's curse, because he's the original, the OG Archer. Imagine killing your first love with a kiss. My god. And then after that, every person he kisses afterwards just dies. But another thing that we learn about him is also this like whole story prior to being a fate. And we learn of this like Marywood tree, which were just like these three dudes that like to hang around and were like, you know, besties. And one day they all died. So you can also understand like his behavior around Evangeline, why he's so protective of her. Also everything that I said about fates, how like they're very possessive, protective, and like just all of the feelings that they feel are just intensified. Intensified? Is that a word? I will talk more about Jax and Evangeline a bit later, but now let's go through some things that I like to call plot holes or just some plot weirdness that happens in this book. One of the moments that could have been added to explain character decisions were not added, and they were substituted with some unnecessary drama that doesn't go anywhere. Like, Luke is just sometimes here, sometimes not there, and especially as a character who was introduced in the very first few sentences of the first book as Evangeline's first love, you would think that he would matter a bit more, and like this unnecessary plotline of him being the heir to the throne all of a sudden, like once Apollo was in that eternal sleep, in his beauty sleep, and Tiberius was in jail, there was no crown prince, but somehow Luke became a crown prince. And then it's kind of explained as if there is some royal bloodline where Luke belongs to. So that's how. But then in the third book, they're claiming that he's a usurper and he's never even mentioned in that book. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. And don't get me even started with Marisol. Like, Marisol is from the first book and she is Evangeline's stepsister. And even though she was important in the first book, she's only mentioned once when she's going to meet with Luke in one of the scenes in the beginning, and that's it. And in the third book, she's not even mentioned. Marisol, Evangeline's stepsister? No, Evangeline has no sisters. What are you talking about? Like, who's Marisol? So, like, these certain unnecessary things, like Luke being the heir or some shit like that, why was that added? That didn't add anything to the story. And like, we all know why we're reading this. We're reading this for Jax and Evangeline. Stop giving me this extra nonsense, okay? Only give me nonsense when it comes to Jax and Evangeline. Okay, now I have a question to pose to all of you. If we compare Jax's behavior and Jax's actions to what Apollo does at the end of the book, where does it rank? So as we know, Apollo at the end of this book decides to erase Evangeline's memories, like all of them, and then he just pretends that nothing ever happened and that they were just lovey-dovey couple the whole time. And in the third book, he does some even wilder shit, so we're gonna get to that. But what I've also previously said about kind of being happy for not reading Caraval before reading this is because Jax also does a lot of shit in the Caraval trilogy. And I'm just thinking, like, if I was reading that, again, I haven't read it, so I don't know in what way it was presented, because I've also seen that a lot of the times Jax would show his soft side and, to show that he's not all that bad, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just thinking, how much harder would it be to root for Jax in this story if I knew everything that he did prior to reading it? And I guess I was also thinking then, what if there is a third trilogy made in this Caraval universe that follows Apollo? Like, how much would we root for him, right? Because there is one of the bonus epilogues for the final book, and I'm gonna go over them again in the final book. But one of the bonus epilogues deals with Apollo and Aurora, another character from the next book. And I'm just thinking, if there is ever a book made about him and whoever, could I root for him, right? Because I feel like compared to Jax, who does a lot of shit, it's kind of like he does a lot of inconvenient pranks, right? Like, Jax is gonna inconvenience you and that's gonna sting, but like in the long run you're gonna be like, but it was a good prank, right? With Apollo, it's more on the lines of, you're a maniac, you're a psycho, get away from me. So how would you write a story about Apollo? Would you justify his behavior? Because I'm not justifying his behavior, to be honest, but in his case, and we're gonna see more of that in the third book, Jax really is the villain in his story when you think about it. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself, so that's where I'm gonna leave it for now. And finally, we're going to discuss the thing that actually makes this book my favorite. So what makes this book the best book? It's the Jax and Evangeline moments. So Jax is kind of, as I said, besides him being a fate and therefore overly possessive, protective, etc., and like feeling intensely, his character is also very intense. And it's especially nice to see him yearning and pining for Evangeline in this overly possessive way. I usually don't like that in characters when I'm reading books, especially in love interests. But in this case, again, like everything that I usually dislike works in this story. Their moments are definitely written well. That's something that I don't have any complaints about. Like, I really like it. But I do have to say, still, I don't like love dramas. Like, every single time when there would be a moment between Jax and Evangeline, it would be either before or after Evangeline kisses Apollo, or Jax almost kisses that darling sister or something. Like, why do we have to always have love drama on top of love drama? Like, I mean, it's enough to just have Jax and Evangeline. Like, I get it, but also no. We got this iconic scene where Jax is like helping clean Evangeline's wounds. He's taking care of her, and then we have the most iconic moment where Jax just tells Evangeline, "For tonight, let me pretend you're mine." Aww. So yeah, Jax and Evangeline are just the peak in this book, and I like revisiting those moments, and I'm very happy that I tabbed them. As you can see, I have quite a lot of tabs because there's just so many amazing moments between the two of them. But now let's finish off with talking about that diabolical ending. I do find it particularly funny how Castor, the one who killed Evangeline at the end from sucking too much of her blood, just goes like, all right, bye, and just yeets himself out of the situation while Jax is crying like a madman over Evangeline's dead body. That was the scene. So I can completely understand why people were going crazy over that ending, because even though I knew how the book was gonna end, because as I said, like I just heard so much about it, it was still diabolical the way that ended. Like, that was a crazy ending. That was the ending of the Ballad of Never After, the best one in the trilogy. I stand by that. But that means that we only have one more book to talk about, and that is A Curse for True Love. So let's wrap this up. Evangeline is living her happily ever after with the charming prince, but something doesn't feel right. Apollo keeps telling her Jax is the main villain who removed her memories, but she also notices how Apollo is treating her like a prisoner, saying it's all for her protection. She falls to a well and is saved by Jax, who does not reveal to her who he is. Later she gets attacked again in her own room, and Jax saves her then too, and he teaches her to defend herself, but that goes nowhere because he's doing that just to be near her. Evangeline realizes who Jax is, but still does not have her memories back, so she decides to tell Apollo about him, but gets attacked again in the forest and is saved again by Jax, who brings her to an inn where they spend the night together and Evangeline's memories finally come back. Jax is nowhere to be found, and we later learn it's because he made a deal with Aurora, the Valor family daughter, to protect Evangeline in exchange for his heart, which he plans to destroy. Upon learning this, Evangeline decides to save Jax by kissing him, even though his kiss could kill her. But fret not, for Jax's true love is in fact Evangeline, and she manages to save his heart and remove the kiss curse from him. But the two can't be happy and in love just yet because Apollo has other plans. He learned about the Valor's Tree of Souls, where he can gain immortality in exchange for sacrificing the person he loves the most. Believing that person is Evangeline, he kidnaps and tries to sacrifice her. But once he drinks from the tree, he gets claimed by it, since the person he loves the most is actually himself. It turns out the Valor family concocted this plan to get rid of Apollo to retake their throne, and Jax and Evangeline are now finally able to live happily ever after. The end. Damn. I'm just gonna immediately start with the things that I don't like, okay? So first one, Apollo's POV. Who needed that? If you wanted to include Apollo POV, then make sure that his character is described more in the book. But also, nobody wants that, so just don't include Apollo POV. I understand that like this was done in order for us to understand his reasonings more and like kind of establish better a villain in the story. But I feel like everything was done really well through Evangeline's point of view already in the first two books, so we didn't need to include more POVs. But I would say the POV that pissed me off even more than Apollo's was Jax, because like Jax is the second main character in this whole trilogy. A lot of the things are explained already good enough through Evangeline's point of view. Like even though we're constantly in her head, you can still see the pining and the yearning that Jax has for her, right? So if you're going to include a Jax point of view, you better do it goddamn well, okay? And I feel like that wasn't the case here. Jax's point of view was just added, I think, once or twice, and it really didn't benefit the story in any way. It was nice to read about him pining for Evangeline, sure, but like then do it better. I just feel like it was added for no reason. But speaking of Jax and Apollo, I do want to talk about the fact that in Apollo's world, Jax is the villain. Just think about it. So if you're in Apollo's shoes, right, you think you have a friend, Lord Jax, and in the end, Lord Jax is the one that puts you in a coma. While you're in that coma, he hits it off with your new wife, and he firmly believes that because of Jax, he's also under the Archer's curse. So his anger towards Jax is justified. However, his actions are definitely not, because oh my god, Apollo, oh my god, he erases someone's memories, and not just someone's, his spouse's memories. He then continuously lies and deceives his spouse and everyone around him to believe that Jax was the one who did all these things. He then went to sacrifice his spouse in order to gain immortality. So even though, like, quantity-wise, he did less than Jax, I feel like he just goes to the extremes. Like, man, why? He was wronged a lot of times, but one thing that Jax says in one of the bonus epilogues is that, like, he cursed a lot of people, but not all of them turn into villains. So there you go, Apollo. This book I was the most divided about, to be honest, out of all of them. I just realized something. Oh my god, how could I do this? There we go. So as I was saying, I was the most divided about this book because when I was reading it first, because I was listening to them as an audiobook, and I listened to them in like span of 2-3 days or something like that. I was just constantly playing Disney Dreamlight Valley every night while listening to these books. A very good combo, by the way. But while for the other two books that I said, especially about the first book, there was a lot of plot points that I just didn't care about, like all the balls that they go to. I'm just like, yeah, whatever, sure. But they were still entertaining enough. However, in this book, I think that's especially because a lot of these moments are in Apollo's point of view. I do not care, okay? I do not care about the politics. I do not care what Apollo is trying to do, because like all his deceptions and lies, I don't care about it. I'm reading this book because I want to see how Jax and Evangeline's story ends. So the pacing just felt so weird because like the first half of the story, I genuinely don't care about. Like there is nothing interesting that happens in it. The divisive thing about this book is that even though there's so many moments that I just don't care about because I was so bored, when the good moments come, they're good. But besides the pacing feeling weird, there's also just a lot of moments that just felt like plot holes. So as I mentioned, Marisol, hardly in the books, right? Luke, he's just mentioned as a fugitive. And that's so weird considering that like he was both in the first and the second book, but like then he's just mentioned briefly and it's said as if like, oh yeah, he's now a fugitive, he's running away from the military and whatnot. Oh well. Lala also hardly in the book. I wrote it down here. Her first mention and appearance is at page 276. Mind you, that's already like 1/3 of the book through. And that also was so weird for me because for the first half of the story, Evangeline doesn't have her memories back. But Jax is constantly there and trying to like remind her of bits and pieces in a sense. So why wasn't Lala doing the same? Like she just comes back after Evangeline gets her memories back. But like where was she this whole time? It was just so weird that she was missing. But then again, so many characters were missing. So like, and as I said, so many questions left unanswered. So the story ends quite suddenly after Evangeline is saved and Apollo is stuck in that immortality tree. Jax and Evangeline just leave the premise and that's it. That's the end. I really wish that we got a bit more of the two of them together. The first half of the story, as I said, she still doesn't have her memories back, and it would have just been nice to have more moments between the two of them after she gets her memory, because she gets her memory like halfway through the book. That is after she spends the night with Jax, just like, you know, sleeping side by side, not like, you know, actually doing stuff. But when she wakes up with her memories back, he's nowhere to be found. He's already doing stupid things. But I just wish that the bonus epilogues that we have, so there is 3 bonus epilogues in total, and each one of them appears in a different edition of the book. So there's like a Waterstones edition, Barnes and Noble edition, and one other that honestly am kind of sad if anyone got that one, because that's not even about Jax and Evangeline. It's about like Aurora and Apollo. Like, why would I want to read about them? But basically, Jax and Evangeline get a proper send-off in those bonus epilogues, and they're very cute ones, and I just wish that they were the actual epilogue at the end of A Curse for True Love. But still, I'm glad that they exist somehow. Because after going through all the bullshit that happens to Jax and Evangeline in these 3 books, I feel like we deserve more than just, and they were living happily ever after. So like, let's just go over things that just haven't been answered at the end of the book, right? That I feel like should have been answered. First of all, is Jax still ageless after breaking his curse? So we learn in this book that it was actually Aurora who placed both the Archer's curse on him and the Deadly Kiss curse. But he's ageless because he's a fate, right? But how does this work? All right, so him and Evangeline are now together. And Evangeline is a human. She will age and she will die. But Jax, he can die. Like if someone stabs him, he will die. But he is ageless, meaning he does not age. How does that work between him and Evangeline? Like, will he lose his immortality somehow? Or will Evangeline become immortal? Like, we don't know. Then what I've previously discussed is how did Jack's heart start beating in the Caraval trilogy after Donatella kisses him, or he kisses Donatella actually. Especially because we now know that Donatella is not his true love, and the whole curse that Aurora placed on Jax wasn't about that only the true love would be able to survive it, but the person who could never love Jax is the only one who can survive it. But that also poses the question, is Evangeline truly Jax's true love? Because if the curse was about someone surviving only if they could never love Jax, but Evangeline clearly loves Jax, does that mean that because she's his true love, she was able to save him? Or just because she loved him so hard that broke the curse? Like, that's also never explained. Then again, the goddamn apples. So that was only explained later in an Instagram post where Stephanie Garber was like, oh, I thought that people would understand it, but still, like, don't... explain it, please, still explain it. And in the epilogue of A Curse for True Love, Evangeline does ask Jax, like, why do you constantly eat apples? And Jax decides not to answer, but he says, doesn't matter, I don't need them anymore. So that kind of alludes, but also doesn't really explain it properly. And that I feel like is a very good description of the whole trilogy. It always alludes to something, but never actually explains it. Okay, I realized I accidentally deleted the part where I was talking about the goddamn apples. So basically, what I meant about Stephanie Garber explaining the apples in an Instagram post, well, under an Instagram post, is that the apples are meant to satiate Jax's passions, desires, in a sense, and that's why he needs to constantly eat apples, because if he doesn't, it's much harder for him to not go around and just kiss random ladies and kill them, I guess. Then why can Jax hear Evangeline's thoughts? Again, I guess the answer to that would be because they're each other's soulmates, they're one true love. Or are they? I don't know, because the curse says differently. And also because of the Archer and the Fox ballad, because, you know, I don't think I've ever mentioned, but Evangeline's last name is Fox. And as we know, Jax is the Archer, so she's kind of his Fox, and he constantly refers to her as Little Fox. That's his nickname for her. So people are also theorizing that it might be because of that they hear each other's thoughts. So like Jax can hear Evangeline's projected thoughts, and Jax can project thoughts into Evangeline's head, if that makes sense. But yeah, as you can see, there's still a lot of things that just are left unanswered, and I wish that there was more. But at the same time, I'm kind of happy that pushed me to read fanfics, because I've noticed there's so many fanfics in which the authors of them are like, I was just so sad that so many things were left unanswered, so this is like me calming my own head and like, you know, just making this canon in my own head. And I really like that people just went ahead and decided to finish this book in a proper way, and I like that. But I am done talking about A Curse for True Love. Let's rank all the books, shall we? We've talked about all 3 books, we've discussed the bonus epilogues, and now let's see what my final rating for all these 3 books is. I've mentioned how like I've rated all of them kind of like around 3.5 stars, except the Ballad of Never After, so I guess I kind of spoiled already what the number 1 is. All of these 3 books I genuinely enjoyed a lot, and I constantly think about these books, and that's also why I wanted to make this video. And even though I've like summarized everything about the books in this video, so like you kind of are spoiled for everything, it is still an interesting reading experience because they're just for the vibes, okay? Again, like you will forget about the plot. Even now, like once I've described everything to you, I'm pretty sure you're gonna forget everything I just said. But what I do hope you get from this is that there's so many fun vibes in this trilogy, and I do hope you read it because of that. Okay, so what is the book on the number 3 spot? Once Upon a Broken Heart. It's iconic in a sense that it started this whole trilogy, but there is nothing really that pulls me to rereading that book. In fact, when I was buying the physical copies of these books, the first book that I bought was The Ballad of Never After, because I just immediately wanted to have the book to like underline my favorite moments. Then I bought A Curse for True Love, and only then I like, you know, mustered up to buy the first book because I needed it for this video. So yeah, like iconic in a sense that it is an introduction to everything. But that's the only reason why I'm going to remember it. And also that cave scene. On the number 2 spot, we got A Curse for True Love. So yeah, that's the one that like I have the most negative opinions about, but at the same time, it has some of the best moments. So that's why this is a bit conflicting to me, and therefore I think it is perfect for the number 2 spot. But that leaves only one book that I've been telling you this whole time was my favorite. And that is obviously there. The Ballad of Never After. Absolute perfection. This is the book that kind of defined this whole series for me and made it so memorable, and that's why this is my number 1 book. So many awesome Jax and Evangeline moments, and they all made me giggle, kick my feet, and do all the other fangirl stuff. I don't know, like I was just fangirling a lot. That's my final rating. Is this series well written? A lot of plot holes, yeah. A lot of unexplained things at the end, yeah. But again, this is not about the plot. This is about the vibes, and the vibes are Fantasy Violetta. But let me know if you've read all these books and watched this video, how did you feel about it? Or if you haven't read these books at all, but for some reason decided to watch this, are you now inclined to read them, even though I spoiled absolutely everything to you? Let me know your thoughts. I'm genuinely interested. But yeah, that's all for today. My God, I've been recording for so long. I hope I'll be able to shorten this as much as possible. And if not, good luck watching this. I hope you had a lovely time. I hope you have the lovely rest of the day. I hope whatever you're reading is lovely. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.